Hello, and welcome to this episode of Building a Custom Mandolin here at Ratliff Mandolins, where we are getting ready to put the stain and the clear coats on this, our custom mandolin. Let me take a moment now to describe briefly and broadly the 4 steps that it's going to take before this thing is finished, so to speak. Number 1, we're going to have to prepare it. And I'll discuss that a little bit more in just a second, but it has to be gotten ready to put the stain on. Step number 2, put the stain on. After the stain is cleaned up, step number 3, apply the appropriate amount of clear coats so that you know you've got enough on there that you can polish out later after it has went through step number 4, which is curing. So, let me go back and discuss for a moment preparing this instrument for the finishing process. Usually, when I bring a completed instrument in here, everything is glued onto it and it's ready to go. I still have about 8 or 10 hours of work to touch everything. Get every little nick, ding, reshaped spot, all that sort of thing. It usually takes a long time to actually prepare that instrument for shoot and finish. This particular instrument, however, might not be so bad because during all of the inlay process on everything that we've touched, this thing has been sanded and cleaned and all like that. So I suspect that this one won't take quite as long, but that's where we're going to start. I'm going to take a piece of 220 grit paper and a good light and light in on this thing and see what it's going to take to make it ready to put the stain on. So, let's get started right now. I fear I may have been a tad optimistic. The places where we did inlay are indeed very nicely clean and everything, but the other places that didn't take inlay, they're about the same as any other mandolin that comes through here, so it may take a little while to do. One thing I'm concerned about right at the moment is here recently the customer sent me an email saying that he might want the peghead face the same color as the body. Unfortunately, when I inlaid the peghead face, I inlaid it with black filler, thinking that, of course, that the peghead would be black, while the body is inlaid and any filler work there is done with this stainable filler. So I'm going to have a real hard time fulfilling that request, and we'll probably just wind up having to have the peghead sort of a dark brown, or maybe even have to push it into black. We'll see. One thing I've been aware of is that this mandolin has been touched a lot more than normal. And I fear that it might be contaminated with skin oil and just things that float around the shop. And I'm afraid that that might have a bearing on how well this thing will finish. Another thing to take into consideration is the fact that this is going to be a solid color mandolin without any sunburst. Now I'm noticing that, like say right here, where you have ingrain, that the super glue that we've used to inlay our pearl pieces is soaked into that ingrain better than it would have, say, up here on a flat grain. Now, that'll have a tendency to keep the stain from sinking in. So I'm wondering if that will be a problem when we get to the staining process, and we may wind up having to shoot just a tad of a sunburst on here, although we're not supposed to. It's not supposed to have that, and that's not what we're shooting for. Still doesn't mean we might not have to, just to cover up some things that cannot be avoided. You'll recall that several episodes ago we had drilled a hole here for the end pin button so that we could put a long screwdriver down in here to attach the neck. To attach the handle that we're going to use when we shoot finish, we have to plug it up. I've cut a plug, and we're going to glue it right in there and let that dry, and then re-drill that hole to the appropriate size for our handle to screw into. Okay, I think that just about gets our sanding done. Now we're going to do what is known as raising the grain. We're going to do that by taking a wet rag and just getting the mandolin wet all over. The water will soak into the wood and expand any hidden compressed wood fibers. In other words, it gives us a chance to double check, make sure that we've done our sanding right. And that's about all we can do for the moment until that dries. So our sanding job looks good, and the only thing left to do before we start taping and covering the F-holes and everything prior to the stain is these little Celtic boxes that frame in our vine pattern on the sides. Here's a picture of one that's already been done, and here's a picture of one that has not been done. So there it's easy to see that the illusion of the overlap has to be done by the scratching and inking in of those little crossover lines. And we're going to do that with this little scratcher. So let's get started. Alright, that takes care of the engraving. And now all we have left to do is the little things like put in the handle so that we can hold the instrument while we're spraying it. Some paper down in the F-holes to keep the overspray out. And tape up the fretboard itself to keep off any unwanted stain. And now we are ready to gather our stains and rags and gloves and all that stuff and put some color on this thing. Let's do it. I have everything gathered here before me that we're going to need to put the color on this mandolin. So let's get started. So now we have all the color on our mandolin. What needs to be done next is we need to shoot a tack coat on here to hold the color on, clean off the binding and the pearl, and then we'll move on to shooting the bill coats and all that sort of stuff to get it enough lacquer on it so that we can polish it out. I think we'll end this video here and pick up the next one, which will be episode 25, as we shoot these tack coats on and scrape the binding. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the future. Bye.